Hi. Hello, and welcome to Premier Cooking. Today, we have a special episode by request. Allow me to introduce you a riddle, if I may. A box without hinges, key, or lid, yet inside, golden treasure is hid. What am I? Of course, the answer, as we all know, is the humble egg. The temptress that has taken us down the road of omelet cookery. Not just any omelet, not the American nor the Chinese omelet, but the elusive French omelette. Now, before we begin, there are a few prerequisites that one would need if the intention is to make a truly French omelet. First, one needs to be in France, which we're not, so this isn't a real French omelet. At any rate, one can substitute and lie, so we can pretend, and I can keep a funny French accent if you like. I don't think that's going to be good. At any rate, you will need a pan, ideally this big, ideally non-stick as well, and not this burnt, but c'est la vie. In addition to that, you will need 3 of our humble huevos, even though it's not a Mexican omelet, and you will require olive oil, ideally in a cool sprayer. Now, as we begin this very delicate process, there's a few things we need to do. As we have our sets and our ingredients now, we must first take our attention to the pan. And this is the quintessential point. First, we will light. Make sure you're not leaking gas into your house because that ends badly. You can see that when there's fire. Now, of these numbers, we want to set it between 2 and 3, a little bit closer to 3. About 2 and 2.89 if it were a decimal point. At any rate, now that we have that, which is most excellent, we can begin the cracking of the eggs. Now, next, we need a bowl. Ideally, this bowl has been setting out at room temperature between, 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know how hot you like your rooms, but that's how I live. Now, ideally, a mixing fork of the rainbow metal variety is best. However, any is doable. Now, with your eggs, ideally they've been setting out for a little bit. You want them at a good temperature. But, regardless, never crack on the side. As we all know, only novices do that. We will insert the eggs into said mixing bowl, taking my word that there's no shell in there because you can't see it, and I can say what I want. We can now begin the next process. Now, with your humble huevos with no shell in there now, you can begin to add your array of spices and mastery for yourself. Today, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to use pink Himalayan sea salt, of course, the best sea salt, and black peppercorn. Now, you may notice that these are fresh ground. That makes a huge difference. I would highly recommend. However, that does mean that you can't hold a camera in one hand and crank them into your egg mixture at the same time. Now, having cranked some salt and more pepper than you did salt into your eggs, you may take your beautiful rainbow utensil, puncturing each yolk as if it were a child. And you can begin to whisk. Now, keep in mind here, you do not want to aerate these eggs. If using for example, a real whisk, you're going to end up getting a lot of air in these, making them fluffy, which we do not want. Ideally, we want a homogeneous mixture, but as you see, we do see some beautiful strands that don't resemble anything else falling down from the egg. Continue whisking until a majority of those, well, not whisking because it's a fork, continue forking it. That doesn't sound good either. Continue until there's none left. Now, we come to the critical point, and time is of the essence. Not just because I don't want to burn the legs of the camera on the stove, but because we need to get these eggs in the pan stat. You can feel the heat coming off, and if you want to do a little test to see if your pan's too hot, what one can do is take a little bit of said egg, place it down, and you notice it's burning. Now, after having run your pan underneath the sink because you realize you left it over the fire for like 20 minutes while filming, you can then spray some fresh olive oil down. You want no more than about a teaspoon here total. That's way more than a teaspoon, but that's okay. At any rate, what we're going to do now, and follow these steps carefully, we're going to insert in the egg. Notice a viscous mixture, and start counting immediately to a count of between 10 and 20. Ideally, what we're doing is we're letting the egg set up here. If you immediately start whisking, you're going to temper the egg immediately, which doesn't end well. Now, in the interim, while you frantically looked around for a rubber spatula because you knew that you couldn't find one and they had all been in the dishwasher, you can then mix around for around the same period of time. Let's say, 15 seconds here, right? Really making sure, especially when using a stove like this, that there's very little curd forming in the center. Again, we're going to leave it. As we realize it's way too hot, we turn down the heat and continue mixing around. All right, as we see, large curds are forming. I think we've only got this process about one more time, which means that we can add the cheese, which I forgot in the fridge. So in the next time that I leave this, I'm going to need to absolutely sprint over there, cut up the cheese, and then somehow get it into this pan without letting the eggs burn. Let's see if we can do it. Good news, everyone. I, in fact, ran out of cheese, so I don't need to do that. At any rate, we're going to continue to mix around here for just a little bit more, about 10 seconds, at which point we're going to simply spread it out and leave it. Remember when I said that you want a pan this size? That was a lie. You want a slightly smaller pan than this. This is about a 9-inch pan. You want around 8 inches. As I'm all sure we know exactly what 8 inches looks like. It's a good metric, and you can use it in many various ways. Now, after a minute's passed, the piece de resistance, the beautiful silver lid in which one can definitely not see themselves nor the camera looking rather silly. But for another minute she goes. Now, one of the most difficult parts of omelet making is, of course, the removal of said omelet from the tray. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove it from the heat entirely, right? Now, slowly working our way around the edge. If you have a really good non-stick pan, one that hasn't been used and abused, such as ours, then this won't be an issue. But if you do have a rather well run through pan, it is beneficial to take it slow, as they say. Ideally, working your way all the way around from side to side and slowly just folding the omelet back up on itself. Now, you may notice some tears. That's perfectly okay. We can cover that up and it will look beautiful. That's why we put garnish on things, right? To hide our imperfections, right? So as this process continues, you're going to start to notice, my God, I've actually done it. Maybe I am a real French cook. At which point you remember that you did this in a non-stick pan and that there are people who do this for a living in stainless steel pans with no butter. And that is how you can tell you're an actual cook and not just a hockey player who likes to make cooking videos once in a while. As you see, the perfect, rip. Oh, well, we're going to ignore that. At any rate, at this point, we slowly tilt the pan out and unfold. Now, We roll it up to make it look nice and pretty. And voila. Now you notice a tear here. Allow me, if you will. Remembering that salmonella is a myth, use the same fork you use to beat your eggs with and slowly slice up a few bits of avocado. Or, if you have guac, use guac. At any rate, from here, what we will do is we will strategically chop this up and place it along the top to cover up the tear, much like a Band-Aid. And now we come to the best part, the eating. Now, as I'm sure we're all aware, everyone wants to eat the omelet, including her. However, one needs to assert their dominance and keep the Germans away from the French omelet. We know that they can't stay away from the French normally. Now, ideally, when eating an omelet of this nature, one can see, when cutting into it, that the center is almost creamy. That's what we want. It should almost be underdone. Keep in mind, again, salmonella is a myth. Magnifique. You stop that. And as you sit back to enjoy the fruits of your labor, remember the thousands of chickens that die every day just so you can eat.